So you look, obviously I love my dogs. I use them for work, but they enrich our lives. They're part of our family. And I guess, why do I love dogs? Far out. That list can go on. There's many things that dogs have taught us, teach us about patience, compassion, to judge something, because we're all going to judge. Let's face it, we're all humans and we're all mammals of the world. And if you're not judging something, then something's wrong with you, right? Yeah. But judge it for what it is rather than what you think it is. Now, some dogs will see a dog and think that it is a bad thing and they'll react. So, of course, we all have our part of our conditioning. But being in the moment and seeing something for what it is rather than what we preconceived an idea to be is really important. They bring so much unconditional love. Like, okay, maybe it's conditioned because they learn to love us. It's not like our babies where you just love them no matter what. But they do. As we said before, they bring that child play to our life, and but they give us an opportunity to be in nature every day and to get out of the house. It's like a free personal trainer. Learning about dog behavior and fulfilling their needs mentally and physically. We have to apply the same sort of concepts in our own life. We need to fulfill ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Happy, healthy, and strong. In all of those areas, and it's a constant grind, where we focus on so many different elements in our life, but we want to try to bring it all together so it can be practical and it can be used. And, why routine's important, why structure's important, discipline, learning that discipline will set us free.
Cool. Welcome, stuff. Panos.
Welcome, Luke.
Welcome to the first episode of Life with Your Dog podcast.
How good is that?
Yeah, man.
Very exciting.
So what are we going to do in this first episode? What's our agenda?
Well, we want to introduce the content that we're going to be putting out to the people. We want to introduce our stories, and we want to talk about, why do we love dogs? How are dogs going to be affecting our lives within all the things that we're going to be talking about?
Yeah.
And, what are our goals? And we've got a few other things that we want to bring to the table too.
Yeah. So this is our first episode, like I said. Let's get into it. So
awesome.
Let's start with the story of Panos and Nooch's Pooches. Now, for those that don't know how we met, you originally trained my family's little rescue dog, Chloe, and you were amazing with her. And so, I was already hosting a podcast with my mum,
Our Human Condition.
And we invited you on that, and that was a great episode. And then from that, you said to me, hey, I've been thinking about doing my own podcast and, wanted some help with the technical side of things. And I thought, why don't we just do it together, man? So
perfect.
That's brought us to this today.
I think it's really good too. I want to add is that because we haven't had a massive history before this, throughout how the podcast is going to go, we're going to get to know each other more, and through that's going to bring up more conversation, and I think it's going to create a real good organic way of understanding ourselves and the influence of how dogs have affected us, and because of that, it's going to create a great dynamic. So I'm really excited.
Me too, man. Should be good.
Cool stuff.
Should be good. So let's start with your story, Bella. This is life with your dog. I'm not the dog expert, although I would like to learn a lot more, and that's part of the reason why I want to do this with you. I love dogs from an amateur dog lover's perspective, but I don't have that education around dogs like you do. So I'm really hoping to learn a lot from you by doing this podcast and absorbing that knowledge from you and what you've done over the last decade or so. So let's start with how you got into the industry and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, beautiful, man. So basically, the story goes that when I was 17, just before I finished school, I was attacked. I got stabbed into the kidney, and dark times for me, brought up a lot of mental blockages and a lot of fear. And so the story went on in terms of I finished school, I got a full-time job, try to work as much as I can, save up some money to get to Europe, for my schoolies present. When I got back from Europe, my parents got me a Kelpie. His name was Rocky.
Yeah.
He was amazing, man. A red Kelpie, and I love that dog so much. The first time I got to meet him, it was really special. He jumped on me, looked at me with this real intent. It was almost like I've known him before. It was really special.
Like he was waiting for you.
It was interesting, man. I think my parents were saying my name a lot when I was there and giving my T-shirts and stuff. I think that the scent and, oh, look, Panos is here, Panos. And I think that could have contributed to that. But I think there was something a little bit more deeper from it. And
how long did they have him before you came back?
probably like 3 weeks or something.
Okay.
Yeah, not even, maybe
Right.
2 weeks. So it was very
In
fresh.
the family house, so he's picking up your sand and that kind of thing.
That's
and
right. And it was our first-
anticipating you to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our first family dog, so we haven't had a dog before. We've had a cat my whole life. So I started walking him and hanging out with him and, getting to learn it. At first it was very surreal, because I didn't know what to expect. And I think that was the best thing about it, is that I went into it with no expectation. And also coming back from a long trip, it really, I had my own experiences meeting new people. We did a 45-day Kentucky tour. You can imagine just coming out of school and going through some of that trauma.
Yeah.
And then being in a new place with a whole bunch of new people. I did go on the holiday with a good friend of mine, which was good as well. But, you get to learn a lot about yourself in these situations. And then coming back home and then having this dog there was, it was really cool, man. It was a really special time in my life.
Yeah.
So, just getting into the routine of walking him every day. And I wasn't doing training. But of course, throughout all that, I think naturally I was obviously teaching him stuff.
You were, but you probably didn't realize it at the time,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was walking up the street and he was really cool. He was with me and he was following what I wanted him to do. Let's be honest, Kelpies are pretty smart dogs as well. So if you're pretty consistent.
Cattle dogs, right?
Yeah, well, cattle dogs, Kelpies, border collies, that working sort of dog.
Yeah, working dogs. That's what I meant.
That's right. They want to work with us.
Yeah.
So,
They have the drive.
yes, big drive. And because they were developed over time to be following humans and to work for us, they've got that natural ability to follow command. So a random lady on the street with her dog walked past. She's, you should be a dog trainer. And I didn't even think that job existed. I was like, oh, thanks, whatever. And we kept them walking. And
Thanks, random lady on the street.
Yeah.
What do you know?
What do you know? Come on, seriously.
Yeah.
So I was studying building at the time, and I worked at Randwick Racecourse as a groundsman. And so life went on. We had Rocky, and he got to about 1.5 years old. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with leukemia.
Fuck.
And
That's heavy, man. After what, 1.5 years?
No, and it was really upsetting. I was probably more upset and depressed when he was diagnosed. We only had about 3 weeks to live or something, which was so random. From being fully healthy, like seemed fully healthy, to being really sick was really, really quickly. And I was legit upset. It was really bad actually in that time. Just as he was.
Do you think that was more upsetting than your incident, than your stabbing?
So.
Yeah,
I felt more upset.
Yeah,
And at that time, I had pulled a hernia in my groin. So I was on light duties at work, so I couldn't really do much. I was in the tractor, smoothing out the sand.
This is at Randwick?
At Randwick Racecourse, yeah. And all I had to do was just think about him. And it was really upsetting. We had such a cool connection that my mates come from their houses to my place, get Rocky and take him to Coogee, go for walks. He really influenced a lot of us, and I think we all collectively went through, that sort of trauma together.
Yeah.
And then the dog allowed us to kind of connect in a different way, which is really cool. And so basically Rocky was really, really sick and we decided to put him down.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later I had hernia operation. So then I was off work, no dog around. It just put everything back upside down again. I really realized how much it was influencing me and actually helping me.
Yeah.
I guess all the themes that we're going to cover throughout our podcast in terms of, what dogs do to us actually. Yeah. But, yes, it was a pretty, upsetting time in that time, especially because I couldn't go back into normal activities as well. So all I could do was think about it. And a month later, I just need a dog. So I went to Sydney Dogs and Cats Home in Carlton, and I seen Ace. He was a little black Kelpie. He was about 8 weeks old, and he was looking at me. I'm like, I need him.
Yeah.
There was another 3 different puppies there with him, but Ace.
He was a puppy at the time?
Yeah. And his name was originally Ajax, but I'm like, no, we're calling him Ace because he's a little acer. And
he's black like the ace.
That's right,
yeah.
100%. He was a really cool dog. He was really, really smart. And yeah, so basically time went on. I started to see how much I loved being with my dog and being with animals. And I was speaking with friends at work while I worked at the race course. And I'm like, I just want to work with animals.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So, and they were really encouraging of me. I spoke with my parents. They were really supportive of me. And they're like, just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. So that was when the penny dropped. I'm like, let's do it. So I basically stopped work. I quit my job. I quit TAFE, studying building, and I started doing animal studies at TAFE. And while I was doing that, I was volunteering at Sydney Dogs and Cats Home. So I was just walking the dogs and helping out where I could. And after a couple of weeks, I was offered a job.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, come work.
But you never went into that situation thinking, I'm going to become a dog trainer or I'm going to get a job here. You were just kind of, very organic.
going with the flow.
Yeah.
100%. You know, and throughout all of this experience, it was my own personal development happening through that, you know, working with my intuition and, you know, trusting your gut instinct, you know, as well, rather than using the headspace so much. And my original idea and plan was to do captive animals and then work in the zoo or something.
Right. Like lions and that kind
tigers,
of stuff.
and bears,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All the exotics. But, you know, the opportunity of having that I found was really hard. And I just thought, well, you know, we've got the dogs here. Dogs are in our life. They're animals and they're affecting us. And we have more hands-on with the experience with the animals or with our dogs. So I just thought I'm just going to stick out here and see what happens. And then, the manager there, Tiffany, we still remain really good friends. And she goes, hey, look, you know, I like your style and let's, you know, we need someone on the Sunday. So then from the Sunday it became 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and I was there full time. So I was doing that, and then I ended up doing...
What a journey, man. And then, like, think about it. That never would have happened. First of all, obviously you had your incident with the stabbing. Very unfortunate. Then you got Rocky. Then he got sick, unfortunately. But then if he hadn't gotten sick and then you hadn't gone to that pound to meet Ace, you never would have had a job there. And then it's just like a domino effect, right? 100%. And that's where you are today, 10 years later.
For sure. You know, it's like the lotus flower. You know, I think the lotus flower is very prominent in Eastern traditions from the story of, you know, like in the black muddy waters, this plant grows.
And it only grows in the mud as well.
Exactly.
It's not in spite of the mud, it's because of the mud, which is an important distinction, I think.
100%.
So,
and that's, you know, that as a reflection of us is that we can truly grow when we're in these dark times. If you're paying attention and if you have a good support system around you, and if you're allowing your heart space and your intuition, that gut feeling to come through rather than using that intellect too much. Because if we're too rational, then we become too limited by what we think through our belief systems.
Too much up here and not enough here.
100%. So having that trust, and of course, you know, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I lived at home and I had to pay rent. Because I was at home and I had that support system, I could then volunteer my time and then work. You know, working at the shelter isn't a very high paying job, but at least, you know, it was filling the heart space, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't really have any clear intentions at the time. I was just kind of just going with it. And I started studying at National Dog Trainers Federation, which is you know, a certificate 3 in dog behavior and training. And we were learning all the fundamentals of dog behavior and understanding how to apply training and psychology and animal behavior and merging it all together. So it was an 8-month course. I did a lot of it correspondence because they're set up in Melbourne. So we did a lot of it in the house or in homes. And then from there, we did 2 8-day blocks down at Dural, which Pet Resort Australia.
So you were doing that, the correspondence training, working on Ace?
Well, a lot of it was like theory based,
right?
But at the end of the course, you have to be able to do a complex skill.
Okay.
So then you use your dog to be able to
demonstrate that.
Yeah. So his skill was to get the toy, put the toy in the basket, and then give me the basket.
Wow.
You had to do that 3 times in a row in a highly distracting area or environment. So
for you to pass.
For us to pass, yeah. And it has to be on a video.
Yeah.
And it had to be not cut. So it had to be from beginning to end. Or so
one shot.
To prove that he could do it.
Right.
And so it was a really cool experience, and I was able to do it. I did it with a broken knee, so I'm hopping around. We can probably post a video up somewhere.
You've had quite a few injuries, man.
Live life on the edge, brother.
Yeah.
But so I was able to do that. It was really cool. He was able to do it in the park while they were bulldozing the playground.
Oh, wow.
So it was a highly distracting environment, and I was able to do it. So so after I did the course, I was fortunate enough. So I really have to give pay a lot of respect to Glenn Cook, who is the manager at Pet Resort Australia, because he was my teacher.
Right. Kind of like your mentor, right?
He's my mentor. He's a good friend, and he taught me so much about the things, but also he believed in me, right? So he ended up getting his secretary to call me and say, hey, there's a job opening down at Pet Resorts. Do you want to get a job? And I was like, wow.
How old were you at that time?
19, 20.
Wow. So you're still a baby, man.
Yeah, it's all just
barely
happening.
out of school.
That's right.
Yeah.
So maybe more like 20.
Okay.
And I thought at first an hour and a half drive was a bit far away, and I told them I'll think about it. And about 10 minutes later, I'm like, I'm taking the job.
I've thought about it.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
So if Glenn, if you're listening, thank you very much.
Yeah. And I should say here as well that I knew about you from your work with our dog, but after that, I just somehow came across you on the Canine Paradigm
That's
podcast
right.
with
Yep.
Glenn and Pat.
That's right.
And that's Glenn. That's his podcast, and
That's
that was a really cool episode as well. So it's all connected.
Well, because I was speaking to Glenn just the other day, and I just had to say thank you to him, because we do need community, and because he allowed me to tell my story, and it gave me the opportunity to understand that people want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
And I have that inspiration to be able to share my message of, of course, my experiences, but also with the knowledge that I have and the experience with working with dogs. And one of the focuses of our podcast, we're jumping the gun a little bit, but I need to throw it in there, is that how are dogs affecting us and how are we affecting our dogs, and seeing it from both ends. 100%. So, because I worked out at pet resorts. I was an animal attendant, so I was working with the kennels, and I was working a little bit with the training there, but I just didn't have enough time. After 6 months, unfortunately, I just had to pull the pin. I just couldn't. The travel was just too far. Unless I was able to move closer, traveling across
It's a
Sydney.
decent distance, man, especially
An hour
in the
and a
peak
half.
hour traffic.
Yeah, it was actually really stressful. I was at that time, got to about 21, and I'd come home and had to sleep for an hour. I'm like, that's not me. I'm a very high energy guy.
Yeah.
And it's just it was just very tiring.
Yeah.
So
You've got to listen to your body.
Yeah, 100%. It's really important. So I went back to the shelter, and they still had a job for me. So I just continued doing my thing there, and I thought,
You've had a lot of luck, I feel, Yeah.
someone's looking out for me, man.
Yeah. But having said that, you obviously have built both at, let's say, at the dogs and cats home, and then at Dural. It's not just luck. You've built yourself a reputation through your
sure.
work ethic and that kind of thing.
Well,
so
it's
they're
interesting.
happy to have you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, having that experience doing the course and doing the practical side of things, I knew a lot of it innately, putting the theory to the feeling or the experience. Like, even though I wasn't heavily experienced in training, I knew the concepts. Just learning the theory to back up the concept, I could see naturally that I had that drive and that what can I say? What's the word? I can apply it, not just think about it and not just do it, but you're working with both those worlds, and I think maybe that's why I probably stood out in the class or whatever. And because of that, when I came back to the shelter, I was applying these training concepts and techniques. I had my pouch with me, rewarding good behavior, and teaching some of the volunteers what to do, how to do it, etc. And they started to see while I was at the shelter that we were working with so many bad behaviors, and if we didn't fix these bad behaviors, then it's not good for the dog. And if the dog was able to be rehomed, we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for that dog for their new environment. So socialization is really important, and just lead handling and teaching them some basics. And I started to build some momentum. So I decided, I was going to start my business, Nooch's Pooches.
Yep.
And so I just printed out some cards, and I just flaunt them out to people that were buying dogs. And
so for the people that don't know, your name is Panos, but where does Nooch come from?
All right, we'll go back. So and I should have explained that. Thank you.
That's all right.
So when I worked at Randwick Racecourse, I think the boys wanted to have a bit of fun at me. So my full name is Panayoti.
Right.
And when the paycheck came in one day, or my pay slip, and they said, "Oh yeah, Panucci,"
Panucci.
He just threw it out there, and everyone had a mad laugh.
Yeah.
And, so
banter amongst the boys.
That's right. Yeah. And I wasn't resisting of it. I didn't care, but it kind of stuck around.
Yeah.
From Panucci became Panuch, and then Nooch was just the name around it. And even though it was within that environment, one of my friends from outside of work started hanging out with my boys from work like one night, and they were all calling me Nooch. He started calling me Nooch, and then it kind of then overflowed within my immediate friends. And that was just my nickname. It didn't bother me. It was actually, it is what it is. It's interesting because when I was younger, the people at school used to tease me about my name. So instead of calling me Panos, they were calling me Penis and all this. It was upsetting to me,
kids,
right?
bro, yeah.
Of course, I was in year 4. It was upsetting. And I'd come home crying to mum, and mum goes, "Listen, you need to make fun of your own name."
Yeah,
and then
because the more you resist it,
exactly,
the
it's
more
funny.
they know to keep pushing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Penis, Panasonic, whatever it was.
Panasonic.
And I started to tease my own name, and the teasing stopped.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a reflection from that lesson that I learned from mum later in life was that, coming up with the business that, initially the name was said because it was meant to make fun of me. Right. It wasn't just banter. I think there was a bit of fun making. But also I kind of flipped that negative into the positive in regards to starting the business. I need to come up with a name. And my friend was like, "Oh, Nooch walks the pooch." And I thought that was awesome. Nooch's Pooches, let's do it. It's catchy. It's me. It's very personal, but also, it explains what we're doing. So So and it's just stuck like that, you know.
Yeah.
So 2011 we started the business. Well, I started the business, and since then, you know, it was very, you know, part-time. I worked a couple of different establishments, just trying to, you know, get experience, but also get paid too.
Yeah, of course. Got to eat.
Got to eat, man, 100%. And then from there, I ended up leaving the shelter. And when I left the shelter and left my other job, I was only room enough for Nooch's Pooches, and it was almost meant to be. As soon as I left, the next day, those calls started coming in.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. So I think you needed...
Because as you said before, you'd been handing out business cards, right?
That's right, yeah. And word of mouth as well.
Yeah,
so
of course.
people would talk.
People talk, man.
100%. And you got to put yourself out there too. You got to have that courage. You know, it's just like that whole, you know, half, you know, like what's in your cup. You know, like I think it was Bruce Lee's concept in his class. Like he had everyone a cup full of water and all his students. And as he was walking past with a jug, he would pour water into that cup, and as the water started to overfill, he's like, "You're not ready. You're not ready." And then one guy seen it, one of the students emptied the cup before he came. He goes, "You're ready."
Yeah.
Now, as that example is that if your cup's full and you're trying to chase your tail to get things done, there's no opportunity for new things to come in.
Yeah.
So emptying the space. Exactly. You know, clear yourself and then have your intention to what you want to do. And as soon as I had my intention, then the energy started to flow through. And yeah, that's when the business became full-time around 2012.
Yep.
And since then, there's been no looking back. We're just doing it, you know, 6-7 days a week, some weeks, right?
Yeah, flat out.
Flat out. So basically now my job is that I go to people's houses, one-on-one training sessions. We do a puppy training, obedience training, and behavioural issues. We were doing dog minding and pet sitting, but we've wound that down because, of course, you know, we've got a baby boy now.
Yeah.
And
So now a father to 2 fur babies and an actual human baby as well.
And a little cat.
And a cat.
That's right.
Yeah.
So my wife, Tanya, was helping me with the dog minding side of things and the dog walking. But she's on maternity leave now, so we've wound that down. And look, my passion's always been about training dogs. So I'm going out there and teaching people to train their dogs, which is where it's all at, you know. Training dogs is one thing, but communicating and translating that information back to the people is important. So the more we practice this, the better we get.
Yeah.
And the more people we help. You know, we've seen over 1,000 clients now, which is pretty good, a bit of a milestone that we found out last year. And we're just constantly growing. So
That's impressive, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's your might be skipping ahead a little bit here, but let's say when you have a client and so you've seen 1,000 clients, how is there like a typical length for how often you would see the average client before they maybe they're okay, my dog's good now, or is it an ongoing thing, or what's typical, or is there no typical?
Look, I think typically we do 4 sessions, and with the 4 sessions, depending on what we're doing, puppy classes go for an hour. And dogs that are over 6 months old, classes go for an hour and a half or even 2 hours.
Yeah.
Generally, we do those 4 sessions, and that is a good place to start. One session is not going to do much. It's all about introducing the training and giving some foundations. Unless we're specifically working on just one thing and then maybe that one session helps somebody, that's awesome. But generally, we do the 4 sessions or more. People do follow-ups as we go.
Yeah.
My primary job is to get rid of my clients in the most polite way possible, right? Because if I'm doing a good job, they don't need to keep seeing me.
Right. Yeah.
If I need to see them 12 times, not all the time this is the case, but it means that we're probably not, either I'm not doing the right job or they're not keeping the consistency at home. So,
that makes complete sense. It's like, I guess it's probably the mark of like a good doctor as well. You know, the best outcome is that they don't have to see the doctor.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A good doctor, a good priest.
Yeah. Their health is good. The dog is good. You know,
that's right.
You've done your work.
100%. So as I said, you know, people training for dogs, once we teach people what to do and how to do it, and then how to apply it, keeping the consistency, the hardest thing in the dog training industry is that a lot of us professionals as dog trainers are really good with the dog. We need to work on, you know, conveying that information back to the humans, both sides of the lead, right?
Because you're training the dog, but you're also training the owner. For sure. Really, because once you, like you said, once you leave, who's doing the training?
Exactly.
You're not there anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And a lot of us dog trainers need to learn this way of understanding human psychology and how we can convey that information by being patient and compassionate and being firm with what you need to say and sticking to the rules. Like, for example, if people aren't doing what they're meant to be doing, well, then you need to find a way to understand them and understand why they're not doing it, and goes really deep into it, right? But and I feel that I have that tendency to have good people skills.
Part dog trainer, part psychologist, part therapist.
Sometimes, man, sometimes it gets that way, you know, and it's cool. You know, we pick and choose how far we go within, you know, helping the people. But it's really important that, of course, I can demonstrate those skills and show that the dog's making that improvement. But of course, as I said, I want to space my sessions every 2 or 3 weeks. And that way there, if I can do that, they practice their homework, we go and we pick it up from there. And most of the time we do really, really good. Some people don't follow it through. Some people have the wrong dog for the wrong home and they just can't manage that sort of high drive.
How common is that? Like they think, I want to, I don't know, let's say like a Kelpie might be a good example because they're a highly active dog, right? And they need physicality to their lives, right?
Yeah.
And then you might have, I don't know, like an old person or I don't know, a family that doesn't have a lot of time to give that dog what it needs. What do you do? It's hard, right?
The first thing we do is obviously we want to keep dogs in the home. If I really feel that they've got the wrong dog I'll always say it and be upfront.
Tell them,
look, I think that we've probably got too much dog in this house and you guys don't so you either need to have good time management, and most people can find good time to work with their dogs and to exercise them appropriately.
Yeah.
But we also need to find out, why is the dog doing this? And if they got the dog from a puppy and it was all cute and then they reinforced a lot of bad behaviors, and as the dog got older, then those cute bad behaviors became big ugly behaviors.
Snowballs, right?
It snowballs out of effect. I guess it also starts to show them that they need to delegate the right time. And look, it's not ideal to be rehoming dogs because, you got a dog, you should try to have that dog for life. But if it's not going to work, then I think having the courage to be that, well, this isn't working for us, let's find this dog the right home,
Yeah.
So how often is it? I wouldn't say it's heaps common, but it can happen.
Yeah.
And once we start to, so it's not just physical exercise, but we need that mental exercise too. Regular training, good management. I think people aren't working enough management in their home as well. So if the dog's destroying a couch and peeing on it, well, then it's as simple as, well, then don't leave your dog inside the living room when you're going to go out for work.
Right.
Just have a good, secure backyard, or you can crate train your dog. There's other options. And once we've got good management and we control every interaction with that dog, I feel that we start to make some good progress, and then the dog can complement people's lives rather than complicate it.
On the inside-outside thing, now obviously, particularly in Sydney, in the last, say, 10 years, we've had a huge apartment boom because, real estate prices and population and everything. So a lot of people are now bringing dogs into apartments. Do you work with many people in that situation? Does that cause issues?
A lot of people can manage it pretty well. But as I said, if they refuse to work the appropriate management, well, then a lot of destructive behavior can happen and toilet training and just pent up energy generally. But a lot of dogs can, a lot of people can manage it properly if they actually want to manage it properly.
Yeah.
Some people just want to find a quick fix. They want the guy to come and do some magic and then the dog's fixed, right? So really being clear about, what their responsibility is.
Being realistic.
100%, and I've had heaps of clients, that maybe 40% of my clients live in apartments.
Wow.
And, and we can come up with some real good outcomes for our training. So, but of course, when people are choosing the breed, when people call me people need to understand that they need to understand the characteristics, research what the dog's about, rather than getting the dog because it's cute and fluffy, where they need to try to understand what their lifestyle is and then what the dog really needs, and then seeing if that's appropriate match.
One thing I found out recently, so one of my friends, good friends, Nick, he was actually on my podcast I did with Mum. He's an occupational therapist. But anyway, he rescued a greyhound, and he was actually living in an apartment at the time. And I never knew, but I since found out that they're actually not bad for apartments. As long as they get their exercise, they're actually quite happy to just chill because, you think greyhounds, you think like running dogs, racing and that kind of thing. But as long as you're exercising them, like her name's Pixie, she's fine. She's huge, but she was happy to just like sleep for most of the day and super chill. But once she goes to the park, man, she's like a bullet,
She's on.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot with my dogs. I've got a big backyard, but even if they're inside the house or in the backyard, they're pretty much very chilled out. And then when it's time to exercise, when it's time for training, when we can then fulfill that drive and that need, that instinctive need, that's when they start to switch on. And I think it's the same with us too. Instinctively, we weren't meant to be living in small houses.
Yeah.
We had big communities, big planes to live with. And if we're out and we're busy and we're fulfilling ourselves, well, then when it's time for downtime, then that makes sense. So, and with greyhounds for sure, they are very explosive, and they are, they're sight hounds. So they're not running around constantly all day, every day. They're waiting for the prey to be there and then they go chase. Very explosive. And, but they can be very chilled out. Of course, even especially if they get a little bit older, from a year and a half, you can start to see that they're a lot more content. But of course, consistency and doing the right sort of exercise and training is important, because if we don't, then we may not see a greyhound running around in circles in the house, but we may see things like resource guarding, destructive behaviour, or constant barking and things like that. So it may not come in terms of, because the dog's high energy, we're going to see them fulfilling their high energy by running.
Yeah.
You may see it coming out in other ways as well.
I've heard that come up a few times as I follow you on Instagram, obviously, on your stories, and you've obviously when you do a post on Instagram, you mentioned that quite a lot, resource guarding. So what does that exactly mean?
Resource guarding is when a dog has a resource in front of them, whether it's food, a toy, whether it's a bed or the couch. So anything that the dog can try to claim.
Yeah.
And if they've been successful in the past by showing their teeth and then biting somebody to keep the bone theirs or to keep the food theirs or the toy, that's where we start to develop that
enforces
aggression.
That behavior.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So the best thing to do, of course, there's so many ways to remedy it, and I guess that could be another episode to get more in depth. But as a general, a lot of us see a problem and we try to fix the problem rather than searching for the solution. If we're working on the solution, whether it's regular exercise training, understanding how to manage them inside the house and all these other things that we've just mentioned, once we start working on a holistic way of fulfilling their needs, and of course you may need to work on specific technique for the type of resource guarding they're doing, we can start showing them that behavior isn't successful and there's other behaviors that they can do that they can still have that resource or achieve something better, whether it's a food or a different form of reinforcement. So, but it all comes down to habit from puppies. We want to start to develop these good habits so then they don't become problems later down the track. And resource guarding can be a very common behavior.
Yeah.
And we see it a lot, may not just with growling or with biting. Or I guess, even Chloe used to do it.
Yeah.
When she was jumped on the bed, she knew that every time she would show her teeth and try to bite, we would retreat back.
Yep.
And then she learned, well, that behavior has been successful in the past. Why not repeat the behavior to achieve what it is? And in that case, it was hanging out with mum or dad or just simply being in a comfortable couch. So we showed her that when we gave a command that we wanted her to get off the bed, then she had to get off. Then, of course, we would reinforce it.
Yeah.
And with good management, if she didn't want the treat, and if you put your hand on to her, then she was going to bite you. So we just used the lead and we put a bit of pressure up on that collar. She came off. We then further rewarded her. And now, from speaking with your mum in our last podcast, you can see now we say off, she jumps off. It's awesome.
Yeah, she's so good now, man.
It's beautiful.
I mean, the results speak for themselves. So, she's a really good dog. I think she was a rescue. We don't really know her full story. She might have been mistreated or abandoned or something like that, but she definitely you could tell she had issues.
There's a lot of very fear-related issues, if I can remember correctly. When she's seen other dogs, she would try to bite them.
Yeah.
And
got to the point where mum couldn't really walk her. We had two dogs at that time. Fudge, who was another rescue, super chill. He was like an Australian Shepherd mixed with Poodle. So chill. He wouldn't hurt a fly, that dog. And she was, I guess, the opposite. Small as well, but just really highly strung. And he you could walk him off leash. He wouldn't even cross the road. We never trained him. He was just really good. So he would get walked, and then that's unfortunate. She still needs to be walked, but if it gets too stressful, we're only human, we can't put ourselves through that every day when she's trying to attack every dog. Even from 50 meters away, if she saw a dog, she would start to whimper and shake and get weird. And
for sure,
you got to fix that.
Yeah, definitely. And look, it's good that it's a more of a common thing now that we do dog training. 20 years ago it was less of a need or of a want from a lot of the dog owners.
Yeah.
But, in the last decade, it's really become more of a normal thing to do. You get your dog, you do some training rather than just neglecting the behavior, because we know that if we can fulfill our dog's needs and do the right thing in regards to using appropriate techniques and understanding what dogs actually need, once we understand that, it's actually not very hard. But you got to create the skill set. You need to create the good habituation in regards to how we train them.
So I guess you really got into the industry, saying, in the last 10 years it's come up, and that's when you started. So you've really, not so much the ground floor, I guess, but as it started to peak and come up, that's when you really got into it, right? So you've seen that evolution over the last decade.
I think social media is a big one as well. In the last 10 years, more social media. People love dogs.
Yep.
We want to see dogs live a happy, healthy life. And if there's people out there, people think of health as just being physical health, going to the doctor or going to the vet. And vets have been around for a very long time, but now we're starting to understand more about behavior. techniques are developing, and we're able to share our information so much, like, attending seminars and, networking with other dog trainers.
Podcasts.
Podcast, of course.
Like this will be on Instagram, we're going to put it on YouTube. So there's like a million different ways that you can get this information out now. So
exactly. And because it's more mainstream, just like the health industry, like people have been moving their body since we were humans.
Yeah.
But now we're putting into more of a structured thing, I guess, because, I'm pretty sure our next episode is going to be about talking about all dogs need a job. So we're going to get into more detail about that. But we all need a job. We all need a purpose. And the more that we fulfill those needs, we start to see less behavioral issues generally as well. So because we love our dogs more and more people are having dogs, and we are living closer proximity, and rules about dogs becoming a little bit more stronger as well, I guess there's more of a need for us to do the right thing for them. And, we become more compassionate for our dogs as well. We're not just using them for work. Traditionally, we're not just keeping dogs in the backyard, chuck them some food every day, and that's just how it is, just so they can protect the yard. It's more that they enrich our lives. And, we love dogs because they bring so much joy to our day. We come home, they're excited to see us, even if it's 5 minutes or 5 hours. They remind us about that inner child within us. So, be happy, have that joy in the simple things.
It's a play. It's play. They've this was on another podcast I was listening to, and they're talking about it. They discovered this decades ago, that there is in mammals and humans, we're mammals obviously, there's a part of the brain that's devoted to play, and if you deprive the brain of that, it causes issues, right? And that's that playfulness of dogs. I think that really brings that out of humans as well. I think that's why we love them. That's part of it anyway, for me.
Well, and look, and that's actually bringing me to the next step. So, like, I wanted to, I think the audience wants to know a little bit more about your story. So, give us a bit more about, why you love dogs. How long have you had dogs in your life, and also tell us a little bit about our human condition, because I think the reason why we gel so well together, and I think this is how the podcast is going to grow really well, is that we're not just going to be talking the dog training perspectives. We're also going to be talking about, human optimization and how we can live well. So tell us.
So my story, I guess, I grew up in the Shire, pretty normal high school life. I went to uni, and I right through high school and uni, I studied Japanese, and I did that for quite a few years, and I was pretty good at it. I loved it. I ended up living in Japan during uni for about a year.
Wow.
And then I came back. I started working, just sort of in the corporate areas, and pretty standard jobs. And then I went back to Japan for a couple of years. I did a few snow seasons over there. I was doing some other work over there as well. So I lived there in total for about 3 years. Then I came back, was working here again, and throughout that time we had dogs in the family house. We originally had one dog, B, who was a rescue from Monica's Rescue up on the Northern Beaches, and she was a great dog. She wasn't really like, I don't know what her story was, her background. She didn't like being handled too much. She hated being picked up. So she was the first dog I ever had. So I loved her as a dog, but never really got that close to her, I think, for that reason. She wasn't like a really affectionate dog. And then we got another dog, Fudge. And man, this dog, he was just like, you talk about, like for you, it's probably Rocky. But just like the one in a million dogs, this guy, Fudge was the foster brother of B. And we adopted B from someone who was fostering dogs. A really famous hairdresser in the city, so Anthony Nader. And at that time they had Fudge as their own dog. And then a few years later, it got to the point where Anthony was coming and going from New York with his work. Because I'm talking like he's seriously famous hairdresser, like celebrities, the whole deal. And it got to the point where he decided it wasn't great for Fudge to keep having him being separated from him. So they really nobly, they gave us Fudge, and we adopted him. And man, he was just, it's hard to describe, like he was just the most incredible dog. He reminds me, and Spades is here, your dog, but I think Spades reminds me a lot of Fudge in the sense that he was an old soul, man. Like you could just tell he'd been here before. He had really human eyes. I'll try and get a photo so I can show the listeners, but he had he had really big whites in his eyes, which gave him like a really human look. You know how often dogs you can only see the brown or the dark part of their eyes. It was just, I don't know, there's just something about him. And, such a good dog. Unfortunately, he did get stomach cancer, I think it was, in the end at about the age of 12 or 13. So we had him for like 7 years. And man, there's only like a few times in my adult life where I've really been upset and cried. And, like say my grandpa dying was one. And then actually that was 6 months later that Fudge died. And that was honestly one of the hardest times, man. It was a big loss. Big loss. And then 12 months after that, I had a massive injury in the gym. So I was doing back squats, just like, I think it had been coming for a while. I started to have some mild sciatic pain in my left leg, and I, being probably young and stupid, I wasn't really paying that much attention to it. And then one day it just blew out and I blew a disc in my back, my L5 disc, and I was laid out for like 6 weeks. Wow. I ended up having surgery. There was a complication with the first surgery where I got a hematoma in my lower back. So it was actually, had to go in and have it done a second time.
Wow.
And so all in all, I was off work from like maybe like the middle of June till the middle of September. I just couldn't really walk or anything like that. And, it wasn't that useful. And at that time I went back and lived at mum and dad's place because, my girlfriend Rach, she was out all day and I didn't really want to be alone, man, because I was in a pretty bad way, mentally and physically. And Chloe was really looking after me at that time because mum and dad would be out as well. And I think I really came to appreciate how much or how instrumental she was in my recovery from that injury. So I guess through the process of that and in recovering and gradually building my fitness up again, you start to, when something like that happens, I don't know if it's similar with your stabbing, you start to have like maybe a bit more, you start to ask a bit more big questions of yourself, and you're thinking a bit more existentially, like, what if that had gone really bad? What kind of things could go really bad in that operation, or if my life I could have been paralyzed or anything like that. And I started to think more about that. And then, mum's been a yoga teacher for about the last 10, 15 years. And I realized like, there's so many stories out there where people have been through a lot, and she's teaching these private clients at the house in a studio. But it's not just about the yoga and the meditation. Some of these people, they're coming there as survivors or currently dealing with things like multiple sclerosis, breast cancer, esophageal cancer, like they've had like multiple stillborn babies, or they've struggled with like IVF. And I think everyone has a story. And then I ended up starting a podcast with mum around that. Like I said, our human condition, and you came on that. So that probably pretty much brings us up to date. But
that's awesome.
It kind of went around in a big circle, like from my injury and then the recovery process. And then I just thought, I wanted to share people's stories, not so much my own really, but to talk to other people and see how they have overcome or transcended big challenges in their lives. In your case, you took something like your stabbing, your near-death experience. You said you on our podcast, you said, on the way to the hospital, and you really like, it's life and death. Like you're praying, you're thinking, man, I could fucking die here. Mm-hmm. And then you turn it into something positive. You become a dog trainer, and 10 years later, you're helping all these people. So, that's why I wanted to have you on our podcast originally. And then now here we are doing one with you as well. I think I wanted to, in sort of co-producing this podcast with you, I wanted to sort of solidify a bit more. I have a huge appreciation and a love for dogs, but want to actually learn more about the technical or the theoretical side of things.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think together we can really cover so much ground and not have the assumption that what people know, and the questions that you're going to be bringing to the conversation is going to be questions where a lot of, amateur or dog trainers or other dog owners are going to be asking. And a lot of these things, when we start to discuss and get into a little bit more detail, it seems so, I wouldn't say obvious, but it does have when we start to really break it down, it seems like an obvious sort of way to deal with it. But because there's so many layers and so many variables, it can feel a little bit overwhelming, just like with anything.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to add, because it's been a big part of the story, is that with Mr. Rocky, before he was diagnosed with leukemia, we got to share this photo. It's probably one of my most favorite photos. And just before he was diagnosed with, Dad was taking a photo of the sunset. We lived across the road from the water there.
Yeah.
And as Dad was taking that photo, that's where Rocky stood. And we'll put that right up there so you guys can see it. He stood right in the middle of that ray there. And it was just perfect. I guess there's no, even
it's synchronicity, man.
When I first seen that, I really feel, and it's part of my spiritual mind of thinking, is that I really feel there was a reflection there, or it was a metaphor. It was a symbol of Rocky was the catalyst to change. It was also that he was an element of me from the other world that had come here and
from source,
and he's going back to source. In that photo anyway, you can see that symbolism, and just seeing it. It's just after he passed away, my parents had printed it and put it on a canvas, and I put it up in my room, and just really reflecting on it one day, I just that's where the moment started to really sink in, to be that, well, there was a reason why I really loved him, because he was an element of me. He was a part of me, and this is where the journey begins, And I think, well, now we've got Spades and Nookie, so these are my two dogs, and maybe I can, Nookie, come.
Spades, hey buddy, you gonna wake up?
Good girl. Good girl. Let's get her up here. So
hey, it's Nookie.
This is Nookie.
And Spades, come up, buddy.
Spades up.
Jump up.
Come here.
Just watch the table.
Spades. Oh, stretch it out
Have
first,
a stretch.
dude.
That's it.
Good boy.
Show us your dog yoga.
Up. Spades up. Hey. So maybe or maybe not the camera can see, but
he's in.
Spades is here with us. So Spades is the dog that I use for all my clients get to meet him. So we use him for socialization.
So what's his breed? He's a rescue, right? So he's a mix.
Yeah, so when I worked at Sydney Dogs and Cats Home, he was 13 weeks old.
Yep.
At first we thought he was a Kelpie cross German Shepherd. But as he started
Probably
to grow,
a bit bigger than a Kelpie.
Yeah, a bit bigger than a Kelpie. I think he's probably got a bit of Roddy, maybe a bit of Doberman in him. He's definitely a mix. He's a beautiful boy.
Where do you think he gets the long face from?
It could be a bit more of a shepherd sort of nose there. But it's really hard to say, He could have many, many breeds in him, But so I use him for, well, actually I was using Ace. So Ace was my Kelpie lab. I used him a lot for socialization. So I want to have a good balanced dog to be able to hang around, especially with those dogs that are aggressive and reactive towards other dogs.
He's like the anchor, right?
That's
he
right.
shows them, hey man,
and we can
chill out.
We can chase dogs down the street and try to, have a dog to be around, but it's always good to have your dog that's under command and can provide good, like for example, when we were working with Chloe, she was very aggressive towards other dogs.
Yeah.
So we first used Spades to socialize her towards, and then obviously we used Nookie as well as part of that socialization. So having a good balanced dog is really important, so we can give that dog the confidence and so we can use our dog to be in a down state, for example, while we walked around. Nookie,
she's all right.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's
stepping on some of the.
Like you said, she's how much? 3 kilos.
3 kilos.
She's like a bottle of milk. She can't do any damage over you.
That's right. And then we've one of my clients was rehoming little Nookie there, so then we took her on, and she's been a real good joy in the house. She always brings a lot of love.
Adorable.
She's awesome.
Look at that face. Huh? Nookie, say hello.
Hey, no. She's awesome. So
she like I was saying before, she is Maltese Pomeranian, right?
Yep.
So she and Chloe is, I guess, Maltese Pomeranian as well. Probably a bit more golden than Nookie, but her face reminds me a lot of Chloe. They look very similar.
When they were next to each other, Chloe looked like Nookie's big sister.
Yeah. But, very cute.
Yeah, they're awesome. So you look, obviously I love my dogs. I use them for work, but they enrich our lives. They're part of our family. And I guess, why do I love dogs? Far out. That list can go on. There's many things that dogs have taught us, teach us about patience, compassion, to judge something, because we're all going to judge. Let's face it, we're all humans and we're all mammals of the world. And if you're not judging something, then something's wrong with you, right? Yeah. But judge it for what it is rather than what you think it is. Now, some dogs will see a dog and think that it is a bad thing and they'll react. So, of course, we all have our part of our conditioning. But being in the moment and seeing something for what it is rather than what we preconceived an idea to be is really important. You know, they bring so much unconditional love. Like, okay, maybe it's conditioned because they learn to love us. It's not like our babies where you just love them no matter what. But they do, as we said before, they bring that child play to our life, and but they give us an opportunity to be in nature every day and to get out of the house. It's like a free personal trainer. You know, learning about dog behavior and fulfilling their needs mentally and physically, we have to apply the same sort of concepts in our own life. You know, we need to fulfill ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. You know, happy, healthy, and strong, you know, in all of those areas. And it's a constant grind, you know, where we focus on so many different elements in our life, but we want to try to bring it all together so it can be practical and it can be used. And, you know, why routine's important, why structure's important, discipline, you know, learning that discipline will set us free. So, for example, Spades can be very... I can trust him. For example, if I was to go outside and grab the bins and wheel him in, and if I kept the gate open, I know that he would go outside.
He's not going to run out.
There's nowhere for him to run. There was a time once I went to work when I lived with my parents, and someone had left the courtyard door open. I came home from lunch just real quick to grab something, and someone had left that gate open. And as soon as I seen the gate, I looked for my dogs. Well, actually, I probably seen the dogs first because Spades was laying in the driveway in the sun, and Ace had the ball in between his paws, waiting for someone will come past and throw it for him. And
that's the Kelpie, yeah. He's just waiting for someone to throw the ball, man.
Someone will come and throw it for me. But that showed me something, that I fulfill their needs. I give them everything they need. I've conditioned to understand what being in the front yard is, and, you know, working on good structure and routine. And even though the accident of someone leaving that gate open, it didn't mean they'll have to run off and run onto the road and disappear. They'll just wait at home because the most important people are going to be coming back.
They know they've got it too good to run away, man.
Exactly, 100%. So it's so, you know, we can learn so many lessons from our dogs if we're paying attention and if we are willing to learn those lessons, you know. And even though we're at the top of the food chain, we are no greater or worse than any other being. We're all sharing this earth together. You know, we're all related, really. So if we can learn lessons, whether it's from our dogs or whether it's from our friends, our brothers, you know, whether it's just life itself, we have to always keep open and receptive. And that's why I love having dogs in my life. And I'm so happy that I could share my experience with others. And if it can enrich their life, and if I can change one person's day, then hey, that's a pretty good way to live. And of course, and I'm learning so much from my clients and people that I get to meet, and, you know, keeping open, you know, not to be like, we want to have, as I said before, have routine, but don't be too set in your routine, because then you miss out on other opportunities that are around you. So have structure in the way that you live your life, fulfill those needs so you're not suffering unnecessarily. Life is suffering and you're going to experience some suffering, but it's how we respond to it is what's really important. You know, dark times happen, that bad things happen to us, but sometimes that's necessary for us to then be able to continue moving on.
Can often be the catalyst for something really positive, you know, like 100%. in your case, you know, your incident getting stabbed, and then in my case, I think definitely my injury and the surgeries, and like the better part of a year to 2 years, getting back to now being a point where I was as fit as I was 2 years ago. If that hadn't happened, who knows? Like, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have had that thought process to even start thinking about doing something like that. That's know, and look, and the reason I started thinking of podcasts in the first place, because when I was laid out, I started listening to podcasts. And before that, I was like, man, what the fuck is a podcast? I don't listen. I don't need to, like, I never really had given them the time of day. And then all of a sudden you find yourself with all this time in your hands. You're like, wow, this is really interesting. You know, you can have really interesting conversations, share your passion, share your knowledge. And you talk in a way that, or the conversation becomes something that once the mics go on, it's different. You know, there's more intent, and you've set a direction, and it's not just like chit chat banter.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, and I think further from here, you know, even though we're going to have our topics of discussion and we're going to try to revolve and try to answer some questions that maybe people have for us or things that we have set out for ourselves, you know, keeping it open, because we see that everything's connected. When it comes to behavior and understanding whether it's animal behavior or human psychology, once we start to address a certain problem, it's going to open all the doors to all the other things. And if we don't see everything as being one organism, or everything's working together, then we miss the point. One thing's not separate to the other. And I think that's really important for everyone to know when they have their dog, and we're starting to experience some issues. Like a lot of people, like yesterday, I had a client and the dog was barking consistently when they would be out of the home.
Yeah.
And even though...
What does that usually mean? Like they're bored or they're lonely or...
Sometimes it's a reinforced behavior. They bark, they get let inside.
Yeah.
They bark, they get let inside. So then they learn that when they're alone, they're going to bark, 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 and they're going to be let inside, right? For example, it could be that they're barking because they're scared of the noise that they can hear across the road, or they see the bird.
Yeah.
So it could be many different things. And as I said, you know, when we address that all dogs need a job, it's going to start to bring that together. But I guess... why does it happen? It's usually a boredom. It's unfulfilled behaviors that is going to express themselves in ways that are like those undesirable behaviors. And what happens is if we don't address the dog's life, like for example, this dog wasn't being walked regularly. They were every time. One of the my client yesterday said, she was telling her husband off, saying, well, when your friend comes over and she barks, you tell him to pat her to stop her from barking, which is you've reinforced the behavior, right?
So you should ignore it, right?
You should ignore it and then wait for a behavior that you like. So normally about being calm and relaxed, and either patting that, giving food and things like that. So being aware of just this, your timing, so important, but the hardest thing to achieve in dog training. Some dogs come from a rescue home and we don't know their past. We don't know why they're doing it. And that's why the barking. And it depends. If a dog's suffering from separation distress or separation anxiety, that could also be another reason why it's happening. But we call a lot of these behaviors, we call them words, and we have these big labels on them. But we still, and a lot of people are trying to, it's the same with going to the doctors, like, oh, I've got certain symptoms. Well, here, let's treat the symptoms. You got a headache, take the Panadol. You'll stop your headache.
Not treating the cause.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you've got the headache, maybe you need to stretch, drink some water, maybe have a bit of a rest. Maybe you've done too much today. Maybe you're getting sick. You know, there's many different things that could be happening. So instead of working on the problem and fixing the problem, let's work towards a solution. And something that's really important is that once we start teaching dogs what to do, then we don't have to focus on telling them what not to do. And of course, there's times where we need to tell them, hey, that behavior is no good and there's a consequence for it. But if we can be showing them the alternative of what you actually want them to do, then we can actually start achieving good things. And through positive reinforcement and strengthening behavior, we then have more likelihood for them to repeat the behavior in the future. So, it's very interesting how some people just, for me, one thing that us as dog trainers can be frustrated by is because we're repeating the story over and over again. We have the common themes with all of our clients is that after 3, 4, 5 years of saying the same story, you're like, oh my God, don't you get it? So, you know, having that patience, being calm, hearing people, when people have something to say, listen to what they're saying, because there's a lot of the answers are there. It's the way that they see their dog and how they interact with their dog. So hearing them out, understanding where they're at. And the beautiful thing about my job is that there's not just one sort of person that has a dog. Everyone can have a dog, you know, whether you're male, female, young, old, whether you're a police officer or you work, you know, at the grocery store. Like, dogs can actually bring us together, right? In so many ways. So the cool thing about my job is I'm not seeing one sort of person. I'm in people's intimate space of all sorts of different personalities and psychologists. Because of that, I get to improve my people skills and get to know people on a different level. And, you know, when you walk into someone's immediate space, you can see what they're about a little bit. You get a flow for it. You know, you have a conversation, we talk a little bit of theory, and from there, I can direct my session in the way that they can learn the best, rather than having one size fits all and go, this is what you've got to do. Just do it now and I'll see you next week. And because of having that flexibility and that adaptability, it's a good skill to learn in life as well, because hey, we're social creatures.
Yeah, man.
We've got to coexist with each other. You know?
And dogs get us out of the house too, and they help us to be more social as well, right?
100%.
So it's a bit like you said, as an example, like say as an older person, if you've lost your husband or wife, you know, your dog might be your only like long-term friend at that age. You might have lost all your friends and your loved ones, you know, not around all the time. So a little dog, a little lap dog could be like your the only thing that you can love day to day.
Well, my grandma, she's 93 now.
Yeah.
And
that's decent, man. That's a decent innings.
She's a real warrior, man.
Yeah.
She's awesome. And she doesn't look 93, let me tell you. And so we lost my grandfather maybe about 4 or 5 years ago now. And when I stopped studying building and working with animals, how do you tell your old Cypriot grandparents that you're going to be a dog trainer? Right. Oh my gosh, that was hilarious. And so I told them this is what I'm going to do, and they're like, and my grandfather's face. Right, my grandma's like, but you're still gonna do building. I'm like, yeah, like, we've got to kind of anyway. So she didn't get it. They didn't understand it. They probably had dogs when they were, from time to time, when
it's like something you chain up in the backyard.
It wasn't like how we see them now, even though they've always had that effect on us, but it wasn't a mainstream idea. And anyway, so my grandfather passed away, and probably about a year later, when I was working at the shelter, there was a little Pomeranian. Her name was Pippi at the time, but anyway, so I'm like, you are going to my grandma's house. So I took her, and I go and see my grandma. Well, I'll see my grandparents once a week for dinner. So the Wednesday night we rocked up, and I brought little Flora with us. She was hanging around the house with Ace and Spades, and that was a normal activity for dogs to be in the house there, and she didn't mind. And then when I was leaving, I'm like, I'm leaving this dog here for you. And you just see how you go over the next few days. And she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Had food and bowl, and I had everything that she needed.
You knew what was going to happen.
I knew what was happening, right? But I wanted to just test the waters out for her, because she's still in a very sensitive time, dealing with grief and stuff. And I obviously didn't want the dog to replace anybody, but to bring what it is that dogs do. And so obviously it's been all these years now since she's had Flora, and she loves Flora. Like, my gosh, she's obsessed, right? And she's 93. How far can she walk? We all give her help with, doing the things, fulfilling her needs, and she gets out and about, and she complements my grandma's life very, very well. And it was something that happened, maybe it was like last year, we were having dinner, and she goes, Panos, Flora's the best present anyone's ever gotten me in my whole life. Yeah. And that's 93 years of your life. That's a pretty good compliment. And she goes, now I understand what you do. And now that she can see that that I've been consistent with my work, and that I haven't gone hungry. And so that's pretty good. And she can see, now I understand why you do what you do. And because of that, I guess I think she respected it more. She understood it more. And I guess there was a lesson there for us to learn too, is like, do what's safe, do the safe thing, because you don't know what could happen. And I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
You got to have that state of mind, but also, you got to be courageous to take risks as well sometimes. And you never know what you can learn. Even when you're 93 years old, you can learn.
You've got to have an open mind. And okay, what is it? Today's like the 27th, 28th of July. You came on our podcast at the start of June. So, I've only known you face to face for like 6 weeks. Yep. And, having an open mind, to come on our podcast. And then you said to me, hey, I want to start my own. Originally you were like, hey, can I rent the studio? And I was like, man, you can rent the studio, but wouldn't it be more fun if we did this as a thing together, and sort of banter back and forth. And so keeping that open mind on both sides, it's just an example, but
it is a good example.
That's where things go, that's how good things happen.
Well, look, like when you first said that to me, and at first I was like, oh, wow, that came left field for me. Yeah. I wasn't sure how to take it. And I'm like, look, give me some time to think about it. And the more I took the time to think about it, I thought, that is an awesome thing to do. Let's give it a go. And obviously we're trialing it out, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think we're going to continue doing what we're doing because it
otherwise it'd be like you by yourself with the microphone, maybe the dogs.
That's right, exactly.
It's good to have have that energy between two people.
For sure. And obviously you've got a good way of speaking, and you've got good I like the way that you ask your questions and you think, and we think very similarly. We share a few different ideas amongst each other, throughout the week, and you can see how, because we complement each other, I think then something can grow from there and exponentially just continue. And I think that's really important. Keeping that open mind is so hard, because when you know what you know, you think that you should just repeat that certain behavior, which of course is true. But if you're not allowing yourself to be open and to be receptive, well, then how can you give anything back? It's really important.
It's true, man.
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
And so one thing we did in preparing for this podcast was I said, let's, as a bit of an icebreaker for the first episode, just so people can have an idea of what we're into and that sort of thing, we said, let's write a list of our top 5 or 6, thereabouts, dinner party guests.
All right.
And mine are all alive, which is fine. But if you've got anyone who's not around,
I've got
anymore,
one deceased.
That's fine, man. It's like fantasy league, so that's fine.
Well, you go first.
All right, I'll go first. How about we go one to one?
All right, good.
Okay, so my first one is, being that this is a dog related, animal related podcast, and man, I don't think anyone, when I say this name, there's no one who doesn't love this guy. Sir David Attenborough.
Oh gosh, that's awesome.
Right off the bat. Because, man, he's just incredible. And particularly like at his age now, you know, he's probably pushing his mid to late 80s and he's still making these amazing documentaries. I think he's given so much to the world, man, like so much knowledge.
A real veteran.
Yeah, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I love that one. That's good. Well, my first one here is Jordan Peterson.
Okay. Yeah,
Come on.
Yeah,
and we're probably going to overlap.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he's on there. So.
Perfect. All right. Why do I love Jordan Peterson? My gosh. Well, listening to a lot of his content, you know, listen to his book, 12 Rules for Life. Obviously being on Joe Rogan podcast and, you know, and just the concepts and the things that he puts out there, I resonate deeply with, you know, I'm fascinated with psychology and our behavior. And
I mean, that's half of your job, man. Like
100%.
Like we said, you're dealing with dogs, but you're dealing with humans as well. And so the psychology of our four-legged friends, but also the two-legged owners. So,
and if we can help ourselves, you know, like understand these things and then mix myth and philosophy and deep scientific concepts, but also the abstractness of the stories that play out and the archetypes that continue in life. And I think that's yeah, it's fascinating. I listen to it just because I dig it. And also when I can meet other people that enjoy it too, then we're all in the common goal for bettering ourselves.
Yeah. He's he's on my list as well. I started listening to him when I was sick, when I was injured. And, you know, a lot of the stuff he talks about, like, you know, chaos and order and dealing with dark times and that kind of thing. And one of the biggest things that resonated with me was his criticism of, I think, modern society's overemphasis on happiness as a goal or as an obsession of, I'll be happy if I'd be happy if I had this or that, or even just assuming that happiness is a goal in itself. And, you know, he says like, well, let's say, like, you know, in my case, my grandma was taken by a brain cancer when I was 18. So what good is happiness when I've just lost my grandma to brain cancer, or my dog's just died, or I've just blown my back out? You know, if you chase happiness as a goal all the time, it's not going to serve you well.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas meaning and meaning and personal responsibility is something that I've been trying to work more on over the last couple of years, and I think it's
beautiful. Hopefully,
it's starting.
Well, I think something that Jordan Peterson said in one of his talks was that in the Buddhist philosophy is that life is suffering. So if we can accept and understand that life is suffering, because suffering will happen 100%.
Yeah.
And once you can accept that and then know that if you're not in a state of suffering and you're happy and joyful and you're in peace and you're feeling all of these, you know, non-attachment and all of the positive, then that's not just a good thing, but it's a bonus. And that if you can keep on repeating that and understanding that it's not an expectation for your life, shouldn't think that life, exactly as you said, is about being happy, because it's a very, it's not a very realistic sort of goal to have. Of course, be happy, but how about you do the things that cause happiness, make that part of your mission, rather than waiting for the outcome itself. And, you know, just like in dog training, we don't reinforce a confident state of mind. We don't reinforce fear. You reinforce behaviors that may allow the fear to continue, or behaviors that can create confidence to happen. So you can't reinforce the state of mind, but you can encourage it, and then you can be a byproduct of your training and be a byproduct of life as well.
100%, man.
Yeah.
100%. All right. So I'll do my next one. So, and I've got quite a few doctors on here, like whether they're, you know, PhDs or actual medical doctors, but my next one is Dr. Carl. So have you ever heard of Dr. Carl before?
Carl, yes.
So I don't know, maybe I have a bit of a tendency to lean towards interest in like the sciences and that kind of thing. But I don't know, he's just a fascinating man and very, very smart. And I love listening to him on his Science Hour on Triple J every week. He's just like, it's crazy. People call up with the most insane questions, and he's just like, yeah, so there's this and then there's that. But one thing I really like about him is he is so honest in the sense that if he doesn't know something, straight away he's like, I don't know that. Is anyone out there listening who can call up and give us some insight on that? So he never lets his ego get in the way of finding the right answer to a question, you know, which I think that's something that came up on your podcast on the canine paradigm. Glenn was sort of saying one thing that he really liked about you was, you know, you're never too proud to say, hey, I'm in a situation where maybe this dog, I don't understand the best way to do it. And I'm coming to you as a mentor. I'm seeking guidance, seeking knowledge on the best way to do something. So putting the result in front of your ego or, you know, your own sense of self-esteem, I guess, and not prioritizing one over the other.
Yeah, man. Thanks. I think it's really important. It's a good quality to have. And the best teachers, the best mentors, and the best leaders in life are the ones that can resource and to be open to, you know, stick to your lane, but also be open to be able to learn as well. You know, if I don't know an answer and then I just go, hey, just do this, then we're not really being a good teacher, good educator, you know, and a good leader, I guess. So, yeah, awesome.
What's next?
I've got Carl Jung.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Carl Jung on. He's not with us anymore, but
he's not.
Yeah,
but his teachings are all out there, and I really, really resonate with a lot of his work. It's so deep that I don't even know if I can articulate it into words. But when you hear it, you feel it. I love the way that he merges the spirituality along with the deep psychology to the way that we live and we operate in the world. And yeah, listening to a lot of his stuff can be pretty overwhelming in regards to being so deep and technical. But like I listened to his autobiography, it was like the life of Carl Jung, and just knowing where he came from and where he went to, and you know, like I'm really into dreams. Like I when I dream, I really analyze it because I know that it's the subconscious.
Do you keep a dream journal?
I probably should continue to.
Yeah.
But
they say that that's a good way of, because when you sleep, so the brain has it's like 4 or 5 frequencies. So there's alpha, beta, theta, gamma, and delta, as far as I know. I think it's delta is deep sleep. So when you're in delta, that's slow wave sleep, dreaming, that kind of thing. And then I believe when you wake, that bridge between going to sleep and waking up, it's either alpha or theta, which is the same as like deep meditation. And so they say that once you come out of that state, that's actually why you can have trouble remembering dreams, because your beta signals come up and you're awake and you can forget that. So writing it down can be useful.
I have a lady that I seen. She was one of my just one of my teachers, I guess, in part of my development from when I was going through all of this transition in my life. Her name's Rosemary Dawson. She's a psychic, but she's also like a counselor, a psychologist, and look, I'm very open to the spiritual journey, but don't think I'm very woo-woo. I think I'd like to try to keep it grounded. Yeah. But the way that like she's like, and she's also brought out a book called the Irish Dream Catcher. Okay. And she talks a lot about dreams, and she's all about the dreams. She'll have a dream about something and she will find the connections. And I think there's, as I said, not to get too out there, but to see that our subconscious is giving us information. It's unfiltered. Whether we're trying to file from the day, sometimes you will have a dream of something that you encountered through the day and it was just kind of a memory, but some things that are pretty raw, kind of unexplainable, but that you do learn the qualities for it if you can try to see it and look back on it and meditate on it, to be that, how is this influencing or affecting my life? And we know we really do have a lot of the answers ourselves, but you know, we're only using that 5% of that conscious mind. We're doing all the rest of the work. Like we're breathing and regenerating cells and growing skin and doing all this stuff, but we're not aware of it, but it's happening. And that's the same thing with our psychology. So learning more about Carl Jung's work and, you know, and finding those connections, I really find it fascinating. So that's why I put him on the table.
And I think that's probably another feather in Jordan Peterson's cap, is that he's obviously very intelligent. And I think what I like about him in terms of Carl Jung is he's taken a lot of Carl Jung's teachings and probably made them more accessible through his lectures. So you can like find all his stuff on, he basically recorded all his university subject lectures for 3 or 4 years. And a lot of that stuff is like, if you tried to read that probably from the source material, is pretty hard, but he sort of does it in a way and tells stories around
Breaks it down.
Which I really liked. Okay, so let's lighten it up a little bit. My next one is Dave Chappelle.
Oh, cool.
My favorite comedian of all time. Funny.
Beautiful.
He's just so funny. And look, there's a million comedians, obviously, and there's comedians that are funny, and you only ever really, I guess, hear of them in terms of what they bring on the comedy side of things. What I really like about Dave Chappelle, other than the fact that he's fucking hilarious, is the fact that, you know, years ago when he had his TV show, he did, I think it was 2 or 3 seasons, and then he just decided that TV wasn't for him, man. He didn't like the way he was being treated by the studio, and they offered him some insane amount of money to do the next season, and he was just like, you know what, I'm walking away. I'm not going to do it. And
Africa.
Yeah. And people were kind of saying, oh, Dave Chappelle's lost his mind. He's gone crazy. But he's just like, man, I've had enough. So he had the guts to just walk away from something regardless of, money or fame or any of that kind of stuff. And, look, 10, 15 years later, he comes back and he's still as amazing and famous as ever.
Honouring himself and being within you. Yeah, I think that's really...
Being honest.
That's
to
awesome.
himself.
I have my next one. I've just listened to his book and I listened to some of his podcasts, Jocko Willink.
Oh, yeah.
I love his mindset. I love the way that he says it straight up. He's obviously ex Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Discipline and routine and, and leadership and, and understanding what you need to do for yourself. And from that sort of structured military understanding and background.
Which of his books did you listen to?
Oh my God.
Is it the leadership one?
Yeah.
Ultimate responsibility or something. It's ultimate ownership. Extreme ownership. That's the one.
How to have a mind
and it's about leadership and taking ownership.
That's right.
And his whole thing is like, if something happens, if I'm the boss, that's my fault.
That's right.
My subordinate does something wrong, it's my fault.
Yeah.
I'm his boss.
Well, like using the stories that happened from when he was serving and then now applying it into business.
Yeah.
And obviously being someone in business, but also life is a battle in many ways. And, and the best way to deal with the external adversary is to be responsible and be a good leader. Be a good leader for your dogs and the people around you and for yourself and, and having, like, for example, he goes, all right, if you're going to wake up 7 a.m. and you got your alarm set at 7, then you better wake up at 7, right? So you have 3 alarm clocks, one digital, one on your phone and one analog. So there's no excuse for you not waking up in the morning. And if you hit that snooze and go back to sleep, you failed your first mission of the day.
Yeah.
And just like a line like that and with like conviction, like he means it and you can see it in his face and his voice, I really resonate with that. And sometimes we need a little bit more of that in our life. We've become a little bit too soft and comfortable and we need a little bit more, this is how it should be done.
Discipline.
Have that discipline for yourself, have that discipline for the people around you people misunderstand discipline. We see discipline as a punishment. You're being in trouble now. No, discipline is about having structure and rules and sticking to it no matter what. Obviously being flexible if you need to. And I think that was another thing that was in extreme ownership is that, things happen. You may need to go down the rank or go up the rank. You need to be flexible with it. So then that way there you can see it from a different perspective, but also giving other people the opportunity to come up and to learn their own lessons and bring it back to so there was many different things. And it's only been recently that I've been listening to some of his content. And I think it kind of just got me to kick me up the butt a little bit more because we're learning a lot of cool out there concepts. But if we're not bringing it to an applicable application, well, then what's the point of any
theory?
of it?
Yeah. Interesting tidbit about Jocko. So he has his own podcast now. He's been on Rogan a couple of times, I think. The first podcast, to my knowledge, that he ever did was, I don't think it was Rogan. He was actually on Tim Ferriss's show. And the title of that episode was something like, the scariest episode I've ever done or the scariest man I've ever met. That was Tim Ferriss's title. And I think without him going on that show, he never would have probably come into the new media as much as he has now.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
There's a thanks to Tim Ferriss as well, he's not on my list, but he's a very incredible guy as well. And then if anyone's listening interested to hear more of Jocko Willink or Jordan Peterson, there's a DJ, he's a British DJ Akira, and he has got this new thing he calls it Meaning Wave. And so what he does is he takes like say like Jordan Peterson or Jocko Willink's speech, let's say from a podcast or from a book or whatever, audio book, and he chops it up and then he writes original music, mostly like down tempo, like trip hop kind of lo-fi beats, and he layers it over that, and it's actually pretty cool. Like it's not bad to work out to. And the thing with the podcast is maybe you'll only listen to it once, but this, because it's a song, you can kind of listen to it over and over. So DJ Akira, that's awesome. Something to check out as well. Okay, my next one is Dr. Charlie Teo. Have you heard of him?
I haven't.
Really famous Australian neurosurgeon.
Okay.
You might have seen him here and there in the media. He is like the maverick of neurosurgeons. So, and he talks about this a lot. There's a lot of politics and infighting and what he basically calls bullying within the medical institution. And he gets in a lot of trouble for offering second opinions or offering surgery to people who have often brain cancer, where another neurosurgeon said it's inoperable or we're not going to operate, it's too risky, blah, blah, blah. And I think he offers hope to a lot of people who have none. But then he gets criticized because he's bruising the egos of the other people, but he really doesn't give a shit about that. I think for me, I admire that, but also the fact that I did lose my grandma to a brain cancer about 15 years ago now, sort of got me interested in him in the first place. But, you know, he's been on a few shows now. He was on, there's an episode of Who Do You Think You Are on SBS where he goes and traces back so he's of Malaysian heritage, I believe. And growing up in the 60s, 70s in Australia, he basically said like until he was, I guess, in his probably late 30s to 40s, maybe even later than that, he was completely separated from his Asian heritage, because at that time in Australia, growing up as like an Asian man, an Asian kid in that era of Australia was just really hard. People were racist and they would treat his parents really poorly in the street and that kind of thing. But now he's really connected with his culture. So I think just overall, he's a really admirable guy. I would absolutely give my left leg to get him on my other podcast. That would be cool, but maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't. It's cool. He's just an awesome guy. I think he'd be really interesting to chat to. What's your next one?
I have Michael Ellis. So he's a dog trainer.
Oh yeah,
in the States. It was obviously I wanted to. There's many dog trainers I want to put on this list. Is hard to get it to 5, and we struggled with 6.
Is he like someone that you would look up to?
Yeah, look, I really enjoy his teachings. He's very so informative with the way that he puts his workshops and his seminars together, and also like a lot of the things that I watch on YouTube and his content. He's really well known in the dog training industry, especially with the balance trainers that I'm a part of. He does a lot of
the balance trainers.
So a balanced dog trainer is someone who uses all quadrants of operant conditioning, so which means using positive and negative reinforcement and positive and negative punishment, and using all 4 quadrants rather than.
So some people only use positive
reinforcement and maybe negative punishment.
There's a topic for another episode.
We're going to definitely get into all of that and understand a little bit more and break it down. But you know, but the way that he conveys his information, he can use very good analogies, and also the application of his training is really good. So anyone out there listening, you know, check Michael Ellis out, you know, because obviously we talk about dogs. Okay. A lot of people on my list aren't about dog training, even though I'm very passionate about it. I'd want to try to see the connections with all of broaden it up and then find the connections and bring it together. Because even though, you know, I study a lot about dog training technique and philosophy, it's really important that we can see beyond it. Why are we doing this? Why do we want the dog to sit down, come and stay? Why do we want the dog not to react to other dogs? Like, what's the point of all of that? The point of it is so then the dogs can continue to enrich our lives, so then they can be the best that they can be, so we can do the right thing for them, so then they're living a good life, and then that's how it's just going to continue to grow. So that's why if anyone's out there and they think that I should have more dog trainers on there, for example, it's really important to see why we're doing all of this. But yeah, Michael Ellis is awesome, and I'd love to sit down with him and have a conversation. Maybe we'll have him on the podcast one day. You never know.
Oh, so he's American, you said? He's American,
cool.
Yeah, man.
And he's got the School for Dog Trainers, I think it could be called.
Cool.
So he's a really influential guy, and he does really good work. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we crossed over on Jordan Peterson. So my last one is David Goggins.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, awesome.
He's another ex-Navy SEAL. I don't know. He's just amazing. I guess it's hard to describe him. If you're listening to this, you know, look him up. Find him on YouTube, on Instagram. He's African-American. When he enlisted to the Navy, or he went to the enlistment office, he weighed, I think it was like 300 pounds, something like that. And they said, you've got 90 days to lose 100 pounds.
Wow.
Something like that. And he did it
Wow.
He did it, man. He's just incredible. He had a really rough upbringing. I think not great relationship with his dad from memory, you know, just not a great upbringing, but he really turned it around, became this incredible distance runner. He holds the Guinness World Record for the most amount of pull-ups in 24 hours. It's like 4,000 or something ridiculous. Just an incredible example of human resilience and inner strength. And he's a funny guy, and he doesn't mince his words either.
No, man.
No,
I love his work.
Find him on Instagram, and he does like, I think he has like a videographer now. So when he goes running, you know, he'll do like 1 minute clips, and it's like listening to the drill instructor.
It's very inspirational.
Yeah.
You know, and he's very direct. It's very raw. And as I said before, sometimes we need to listen to a little bit of the non-PC side of life, because that's a conversation we're having with ourselves. Yeah. We think about how we should say things because, you know, we have to be very sensitive with our words these days. But if you can hear someone who's raw and just says it up front, it speaks right to the core of your being, you know? And I respect that because of that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's our list, man. That's good.
Actually, I got one more.
One more. Okay.
Well, actually, I got two more. But anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
We can't forget about Alan Watts. Now, I know he's not with us either, but what an awesome individual he was. And I love listening to his stuff. There's no time that you can listen to Alan Watts and not have your mind flipped upside down. It's very raw. It's very true. It's very, you know, he's a stand-up philosopher. So, you know, he was very famous for, you know, getting out there in front of people and expressing himself with, in regards to, you know, I think he was a minister for some time as a Christian, but then he studied a lot about Japanese Buddhism, so about Zen Buddhism.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, like, you know, just listen to his stuff, I've listened to a lot of his books because he was doing a lot of recording. So he was probably doing his own sort of podcast back in the day, right? But yeah, really cool. It keeps that, the paradox to life. Everything's very paradoxical. Yeah. Don't try to nail it down. The more you try to hold it, the more you lose it. Yeah. And I think that's really cool because in terms of talking about behavior and understanding of psychology, having the flip side to it all in terms of you're never going to grasp it. And it's always a chase of finding yourself, you know, looking, like as we talked about in the beginning, looking for happiness. Yeah. It's a pursuit of the happiness is what the pursuit is rather than getting it itself. Yeah, man. So I think that was really cool and something to...
the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think so.
Awesome, man. Well, that's like we've done like 90 minutes, so I think that's a good start.
100%
for the first episode. You know, when we were discussing doing this podcast, you sent me like a list of stuff that you want to talk about over, say, 10 episodes or so. So there's a lot of content to come. I think, like you said, each episode will probably have a broad topic, and then build it around that. But obviously, there's a lot of just general banter and try not to keep it too structured. So I hope people enjoy it. So it's Life with Your Dog podcast on Instagram,
Facebook, and YouTube. We're going to have
and lifewithyourdogpodcast.com.
That's right
as well. Yeah, and if you like the show, please do hit subscribe, write a review. Ideally, if you're on an iPhone, write a review for us on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, because podcasts live and die on Apple. That's just how it is. Yep. I know that for example, with my podcast, with Mum, 70% of our traffic comes from that one app alone. Yep. So please do, if you enjoy it, tell your friends about it. If you don't, tell us.
100%. Well, you know, our Human Condition.
Our Human Condition podcast on Instagram as well. Panos has an episode on there, so you can listen to that. There's a few others on there that you guys might be interested in. We just did one with the ex-CEO of Lifeline Australia, and we've got a few more coming up. So yeah, it's awesome. Good fun. And
of course, you know, Nooch's Pooches on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can check out our content and, you know, see the actual application of dog training itself. Yeah, and hey, it's been an awesome first episode.
Yeah.
How exciting.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, brother.
Hey.